All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Oh, that did not go as planned. I'm not quite sure what should. Okay, there we go. Hey, everyone. Welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully this mic is not a problem, but we're going to start reading today Feather Pillow, written by Horatio Quiroga. He wrote in the early 19th century. He wrote some Gothic horror novels. This was originally written in Spanish, but has been translated to English. Let's go ahead and get started because I don't want to take too much time. Her entire honeymoon gave her hot and cold shivers. A blonde, angelic, and timid young girl, the childish fancies she had dreamed about being a bride had been chilled by her husband's rough character. She loved him very much nonetheless, although sometimes she gave a light shudder when, as they returned home through the streets together at night, she cast a furtive glance at the impressive stature of her Jordan, who had been silent for an hour. He, for his part, loved her profoundly, but never let it be seen. So and stop there. As you can see, I've already highlighted and done some writing here. I pre-recorded this and couldn't find the footage, so we're re-recording it here. So I thought it was important to note that chilled by her husband's rough character. That means her husband's a little rough around the edges. He's probably not super, super sweet and romantic, like that kind of idea. And it sounds like she at one point had this idea that she was going to be in this romantic love, and what ended up happening wasn't that. So we learn that she married a tall guy. We know this because she says that her husband has impressive stature. Where's my Apple Pencil? I seem to have lost my pencil. Oh, there it is. We see here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that right here. They say impressive stature. We know the guy's tall. Stature means height, as you see in the bottom circle right there. He'd been silent, so he's probably a pretty silent guy. He doesn't talk much, a little rough around the edges, but he loves her. We know that. So let's go ahead and look at the second paragraph. So we've gotten some character development here. We've gotten some idea of her husband, a little bit about the woman. We know she's blonde and she's timid. She's pretty young. So we got some characters here. We got 2 characters so far. For 3 months, they had been married in April. They lived in a special kind of bliss. Doubtless she would have wished less severity in the rigorous sky of love, more expansive and less cautious tenderness. But her husband's impassive manner always restrained her. The house in which they lived influenced her chills and shuddering to no small degree. The whiteness of the silent patio, friezes, columns, and marble statues produced the wintry impression of an enchanted palace. Inside the glacial brilliance of stucco, the completely bare walls affirmed the sensation of unpleasant coldness. As one crossed from one room to another, the echo of his steps reverberated throughout the house, as if long abandonment had sensitized its resonance. It's a lot of weird words, but basically, it's just the house. It feels pretty bare. It's pretty empty. She feels weird in the house. It's pretty white. Looks like an enchanted palace, like all white, all pretty. Paragraph 4. Alicia passed the autumn in this strange love nest. She had determined, however, to cast a veil over her former dreams and live like a sleeping beauty in the hostile house, trying not to think about anything until her husband arrived each evening. So now we've learned the woman's name must be Alicia, because we see Alicia passed the autumn in this strange love nest. She's got to be Alicia. We know the husband's name is Jordan. Why? Because if you go back a page, we see she says the impressive stature of her Jordan, meaning his name was Jordan. Hostile means unfriendly. I looked that up already for you and go ahead and wrote that there. So she tries not to think much about the house until her husband comes home from work. Paragraph 5. It is not strange that she grew thin. She had a light attack of influenza that dragged on insidiously for days and days. After that, Alicia's health never returned. Finally, one afternoon, she was able to go into the garden, supported on her husband's arm. She looked around listlessly. Suddenly, Jordan, with deep tenderness, ran his hand very slowly over her head, and Alicia instantly burst into sobs, throwing her arms around his neck. For a long time, she cried out all the fears she had kept silent. redoubling her weeping at Jordan's slightest caress. Then her sobs subsided, and she stood a long while, her face hidden in the hollow of his neck, not moving or speaking a word. Influenza, by the way, is flu, y'all. So insidiously, so over time, it just kind of like lasted for days and days, and she had the flu. She got pretty sick, so she lost some weight. And then one day, she finally can go outside, but her husband's got to support her because she's really weak. And then her husband, who's not a really like tender guy, we know that because they say he's kind of rough around the edges. He kind of runs his hand over her head, and she starts breaking down because he's not really a guy who's very touchy-feely or very like into his emotions, and he's trying, so she knows something's wrong. Paragraph 6. This was the last day Alicia was well enough to be up, so she never gets up again. On the following day, she awakened feeling faint. Jordan's doctor examined her with minute attention, prescribing calm and absolute rest. So minute at the bottom there tells you it means precise. So he looks at her, he looks around, he gets really in depth and goes, you just need to stay in bed. Like, you're really sick, just stay in bed. I don't know, he said to Jordan at the street door. She has a great weakness that I'm unable to explain. And with no vomiting, nothing. If she wakes tomorrow as she did today, call me at once. So the doctor doesn't know what's wrong. So he tells her to stay in bed over here. He doesn't know what's wrong. When she awakened the following day, Alicia was worse. There was a consultation, so they met with the doctor. It was agreed there was an anemia of incredible progression, completely inexplicable. Anemia, weak condition, inexplicable, unable to be contained. So she's just super weak and nobody knows why. Alicia had no more fainting spells, but she was visibly moving toward death. The lights were lighted all day long in her bedroom, and there was complete silence. Hours went by without the slightest sound. Alicia dozed. Jordan virtually lived in the drawing room, which was also always lighted. With tireless persistence, he paced ceaselessly from one end of the room to the other. The carpet swallowed his steps. At times, he entered the bedroom and continued his silent pacing back and forth alongside the bed, stopping for an instant at each end to regard his wife. So she stays in the bedroom. All the house is lit. Oh, that's a very thick line. All house is lit. Alicia stays in bed and sleeps. Paragraph 9. Suddenly, Alicia began to have hallucinations, vague images at first seeming to float in the air, then descending to floor level. Her eyes excessively wide, she stared continuously at the carpet on either side of the head of her bed. One night, she suddenly focused on one spot. Then she opened her mouth to scream, and pearls of sweat suddenly beaded her nose and lips. Jordan! Jordan! She clamored, rigid with fright, still staring at the carpet. Jordan ran to the bedroom, and when she saw him appear, Alicia screamed with terror. It's I, Alicia, it's I! Let's go ahead and break this down real quick. So we see Alicia's got some hallucinations here. I spelled Alicia real wonky there. So Alicia has hallucinations. And she clearly, I spelled hallucinations wrong. Has hallucinations and doesn't recognize her husband. Okay. So you know Jordan comes running into the bedroom, and he's super worried about Alicia. Alicia looked at him confusedly. She looked at the carpet. She looked at him once again, and after a long moment of stupefied confrontation, she regained her senses. She smiled and took her husband's hand in hers, caressing it, trembling for half an hour. So we know for a little bit there, she forgets. Jordan but then remembers him. Among her most persistent hallucinations was that of an anthropoid, poised on his fingertips on the carpet, staring at her. The doctors returned, but to no avail. They saw before them a diminishing life, a life bleeding away day by day, hour by hour, absolutely without their knowing why. During their last consultation, Alicia lay in a stupor while they took her pulse, passing her inert wrist from one to another. They observed her a long time in silence and then moved into the dining room. So let's talk about what does she see? So anthropoid? It's a being with a human-like form. So she sees something that's kind of like a human, but they don't know what it is, and they're kind of like, it's poised on his fingertips. So he's always like on his fingers staring at her. And the doctors don't know what's going on. Paragraph 16. Phew. The discouraged chief physician shrugged his shoulders. It's an inexplicable case. There's little we can do. That's my last hope, Jordan groaned, and he staggered blindly against the table. Alicia's life was fading away in the sub-delirium of anemia, a delirium which grew worse through the evening hours, but which let up somewhat after dawn. The illness never worsened during the daytime, but each morning she awakened, pale as death, almost in a swoon. It seemed only at night that her life drained out of her in new waves of blood. Always when she awakened, she had the sensation of lying collapsed in the bed with a 1,000,000-pound weight on top of her. Following the third day of this relapse, she never left her bed again. She could scarcely move her head. She did not want her bed to be touched, not even to have her bed covers arranged. Her crepuscular terrors advanced now in the form of monsters that dragged themselves towards the bed and laboriously climbed upon the bedspread. So, her subdelirium here means her disturbed state of mind. And we've got, over here, we've also got the fact that, let's see, crepuscular. So crepuscular is, let's see, I lost it. Oh, here. They only occurred at twilight. So we learn here, she only gets worse at night. Next page. Then she lost consciousness. The final 2 days, she raved ceaselessly in a weak voice. The lights funerally illuminated the bedroom and drawing room. In the deathly silence of the house, the only sound was the monotonous delirium from the bedroom and the dull echoes of Jordan's eternal pacing. So she stops being conscious. She stops being awake. Finally, Alicia died. The servant, when she came in afterward to strip the now empty bed, stared wonderingly for a moment at the pillow. Sir, she called Jordan in a low voice. There are stains on the pillow that look like blood. Jordan approached rapidly and bent over the pillow. Truly, on the case on both sides of the hollow left by Alicia's head were 2 small dark spots. So she dies. Let's go here. Alicia dies. Servant finds blood on her pillow. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause this so I can do the second part of this. They look like punctures, the servant murmured after a moment of motionless observation. Hold it up to the light, Jordan told her. So punctures are like small holes. Like you could say like Capri Suns, when you put the little straw in the Capri Sun, you have to like stab the Capri Sun to like put the straw in. That'd be a puncture. The hole that was left over would be a puncture. So basically there's little small holes in the pillow. So there are small holes in the pillow, in Alicia's pillow. And so then we know that Jordan asks, hey, hold it up to the light. The servant raised the pillow, but immediately dropped it and stood staring at it, livid and trembling. Without knowing why, Jordan felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. So she picks it up and then she puts it back down. But drops it. And Jordan, the husband, is afraid. So they are afraid of whatever is going on. They don't know why. What is it? He murmured in a hoarse voice. It's very heavy, the servant whispered, still trembling. Jordan picked it up. It was extraordinarily heavy. He carried it out of the room, and on the dining room table, he ripped open the case and the ticking with a slash. The top feathers floated away, and the servant, her mouth opened wide, gave a scream of horror and covered her face with her clenched fists. In the bottom of the pillowcase, among the feathers, slowly moving its hairy legs, was a monstrous animal, a living, viscous ball. It was so swollen one could scarcely make out its mouth. Night after night, since Alicia had taken to her bed, this abomination had stealthily applied its mouth, its proboscis, one might better say, to the girl's temples, sucking her blood. The puncture was scarcely perceptible. The daily plumping of the pillow had doubtlessly at first impeded its progress, but as soon as the girl could no longer move, the suction became vertiginous. In 5 days, in 5 nights, the monster had drained Alicia's life away. These parasites of feathered creatures, diminutive in their habitual environment, reach enormous proportions under certain conditions. Human blood seems particularly favorable to them, and it is not rare to encounter them in feather pillows. And so that ends our very first story. What I want to have you guys do now is attached. I have assigned you guys an assignment that has a summary page in Schoology. I would like you to go to that summary page you see in Schoology, and you're going to complete it. It's going to look something a little bit like this. It's a little bit like this. So this is a summarizing page, and at the top here, you're going to put 3 pictures right where you see these boxes. The who is this about? The what is this about? When did this happen? Where did it happen? And why did it happen? It's just a short summary. I like to do short summaries the very first time we ever read, just to kind of see if we understand what the story is about. This shouldn't take you too long, so go ahead and on Schoology find this assignment and then fill it out. When I see you on Friday, we're going to talk about the story a bit, so please make sure you do this summarization page and you submit it. That way you remember what we read. And on Friday, we're going to do the evidence-based portion and talk about our essay prompt. So I'm going to see you guys on Friday.